No.
The omentum, right. So what is the true stomach in a ruminant? The abomasum. So this right here is the abomasum. What part of the omentum attaches to this is the greater curvature. The greater omentum is here. What's the other part of other curvature? The lesser curvature. So this is the lesser omentum.
So all this, like,
The whole thing is the omentum. This is all the greater. The lesser runs the other way. Right. So what are these organs right here? This one organ. Lungs are up here, the liver, right? So liver here, lying between the medial and the quadrate lobes of the liver is this other organ. What do y'all think it is? Spleen's on the rumen. What else is in the GI system? Tiny organ that can be really painful if you have stones in it. Gallbladder. So the gallbladder is embedded in the liver. So think about it. If you have gallstones, they poke out of the liver and poke out of the gallbladder and actually puncture the liver to the liver. That's why it's painful. So coming out of the abomasum, we go into the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum. This part of the stomach leading into the duodenum is called the pylorus. This muscle right here that restricts or controls movement of food from the stomach to the duodenum is the pyloric sphincter. So you can feel it. It's a hard muscle. You can determine that it's different than the other tissues. Everything around it is squishy, but it's a hard muscle. So a sphincter muscle is a circular muscle. It's going to open, or when it's constricted, it's going to be closed. When it relaxes, it's going to open. So this muscle controls the movement of the food. So abomasum to the first part of the small intestine, or the duodenum. Let's go ahead and so coming up to the duodenum, we enter the sigmoid loop of the duodenum, which is this right here. So the loop, the part where the duodenum is going to come up and come back down. It's important that we identify it because right behind it, can y'all cut those ribs right there? Careful, let's not cut that kidney. There you go. So this is the sigmoid loop of the duodenum right here. So coming out of the abomasum, pylorus, pyloric sphincter, duodenum, the sigmoid loop of the duodenum. Underneath it, see that right there? That flat organ? That's the pancreas. So the pancreas lies underneath the sigmoid loop of the duodenum. So the sigmoid loop is going to keep going. Her rumen is huge. What'd you do?
I didn't take the spicy oil.
Uh-oh.
It's like you're
So what's the second part of the small intestine?
if you're walking outside with the ileum, or is it yeah.
So jejunum, right?
Jejunum, I was like, I don't even know how to say it.
Okay, so the duodenum's going to come down. You see it right there?
Right here.
Yep, it's going to keep going, and then it's going to turn into the jejunum. This right here, this mess, is the jejunum. So the jejunum is where all of the nutrients are absorbed. It's got a lot, it's all curled up and smushed together, but if you fold it out, it's got a lot of surface area, right? It's long. So it's long because there's a lot of stuff going on in this part of the GI tract. All of the nutrients are coming out of the food. It's held together by the mesentery. So this part, this web that keeps it all tied together is the mesentery. If you look, there are nerves and vascularization in the mesentery, right? So who's heard of an animal having like a diseased intestine, or part of their intestine dies? What they have to do, if this part of the intestine were to die, They would come in and have to cut this out and then reconnect all these blood vessels. So it's very delicate. It's a really intricate procedure, and it can be really, usually it's deadly because of that. So this is the mesentery. Also in the mesentery are these lymph nodes. So these are mesenteric lymph nodes. We talked about on Monday that the gastrointestinal system has immunological function, right? So think when we get sick, say we get E. coli or something, and it harbors or it grows or it invades our stomach or gastrointestinal tract. In order to respond to that quickly, we need lymph nodes that are nearby. So the mesenteric lymph nodes are the ones that respond to infections or foreign agents or foreign things in the gastrointestinal system. So the jejunum is going to keep going, and it's going to transition into the last part of the small intestine, which is called what? The ileum. So the difference, the ileum on our hip was ILI. The ileum in the GI system is ILE. Right. So the ileum empties into the first part of the large intestine, and this up here is the large intestine. So if we want you to identify the ileum, we'll tag right here. So ileum here empties into the first part of the large intestine called the cecum. So this little piece of tissue right here in between them is called the ileocecal fold. So in between the ileum and the cecum is the ileocecal fold. The cecum is really distinguishable because it's bulky, right? It's pretty big. It also has this blind end, so this pouch that doesn't go anywhere. It just food empties in here and then it flushes, but sometimes it doesn't flush out of here, so stuff can get stuck in this part of the cecum. So after the cecum, it goes into the ascending colon. This first, oh, that's pleasant. The first part of the colon is called the proximal loop of the ascending colon. So right off the cecum, it folds around into the proximal loop of the ascending colon. We'll identify here in a second the distal loop of the ascending colon. The proximal loop, though, is the bulky one. It's the one that's bigger and usually squishy, honestly. So proximal loop of the ascending colon is going to go into this cool thing. What does that look like? The spiral colon. So going into the spiral colon is the centripetal coil. The centripetal coil goes in, and the way that I like to remember it, if I think of, it sounds like a petal, right? When you say centripetal, you hear like maybe a flower petal. Well, flower petals will close, they'll come in. So I think of a flower closing or a petal going inward. So centripetal goes in, and once it gets to the point where it stops going in and folds here on itself, this fold is called the central flexure. So it's where the centripetal coil reaches the center of the spiral and starts going back out. The one that's going out is called the centrifugal coil. So centripetal in, centrifugal goes out. So the centrifugal coil is going to come out all the way around. It's going to come out right there. The centrifugal coil is the first part of the small intestine or the large intestine where we see the fecal balls. So you can feel in there. It's up here it was very squishy, right? But right here we start to see the formation of the balls. So if you remember from lecture on Monday, in the large intestine what's happening is the body is withdrawing water, it's withdrawing electrolytes. So in this part of the intestine there's a lot of fluid. But once we get to the large intestine, all the fluid's coming out. So that's where we start to see dehydrated like shapes forming, and that's really gross to think about. But anyway, fecal balls first appear in the centrifugal coil. It's going to go all the way around. Come back up right here. You can see it right there. This right here is the distal loop of the ascending colon. So proximal loop was the bulky one, no fecal balls. Distal loop has the fecal balls and it's underneath the proximal. So proximal, distal loop. Both ascending colon, one's a proximal, one's a distal. Then it's going to shoot across the body and go into the transverse colon. We won't ask you to identify the transverse colon because we can't see it. It's going across the top part of the body. But from the transverse colon, it comes back up and goes into the descending colon. So this right here is the descending colon. This is what will transition into the rectum and the anus back here. So that's the descending. And it's the more dorsal of the colon. Okay, so you guys go through it, and then here in a second they'll have the internal stomach the parts of the stomach where you can go through those. But go through that on your own and make sure that you can flow and follow how food